Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the January 27th meeting of El Dorado Irrigation District Board of Directors to order. Please roll call.
Directors Penn, Mansfield, Dwyer, Anzini, and Day present. General Manager Abercrombie, General Counsel Polson, Clerk to the Board Sullivan present.
Great. Please rise and join me in the pledge. Ready, pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Moved and seconded. Any board comment on the agenda? Any public comment on the agenda? Okay, please.
If members of the public would like to address the board on the adoption of today's agenda, moved by Director Mansfield and seconded by Director Day, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on the adoption of today's agenda. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Thank you. Please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Jim, do we have any reports on our employees, outstanding employees?
Yes, we have actually 4 recognitions today I'd like to share with you, and some of my staff will. The first one was we received a call from one of our customers expressing appreciation for an exceptional assistance provided by Keith Johnson and Eric Tyler in construction in the drinking water division. The customer called conveying the gratitude and professionalism for our employees, and it's just another example of outstanding service. The next one, we'll have Martin or Bill come up and talk a little bit about it. While we're all home enjoying a beautiful Christmas, you know, our employees are out there working. And Bill, if you could come up and just summarize what happened and share with the board, the employees that were dedicated enough to be out there on Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, Board. Bill Pedersen, Drinking Water Operations Manager, here today to present a GM communication item. As you're aware, we had a pretty large-scale outage in the community of Camino on Christmas Day. It was on Ponderosa Road, cross street, Mount Danaher. Crews showed up on site initially at the leak site, quickly excavated the area, found that we had a service line leak right off of the El Dorado main number 1. Customarily, we typically would have an isolation valve right there at the main. We would shut this off, and it would typically only affect one customer. And then in this instance, crews realized that there was no corporation stop. The service was connected directly off the main. As a result, we had to do a pretty wide-scale shutdown on that main. And all the customers, about 520, were notified promptly. There's a little bit of feedback.
Hold on
here.
for just one second. Bill.
My apologies.
We have a new George.
We have a new
Yeah.
There we see now, okay.
mute.
We kill that.
Hit the mute button.
I'm trying to. There, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't like the sound of my own voice for some reason. It's weird. So at any rate, the crews, as they're excavating, discovered they also had some damage to the weldolette that connects that service line to the main, resulting of the welders needing to come out, retap that, so it prolonged our repair efforts a little bit more. So on EDM 1, we have about 425 of these direct connections on the main. So this is something that we're going to see more and more of as time continues to march on and our infrastructure continues to age out. So as a result, the district would like to give its gratitude and thanks to the employees that came out. In construction, we had Curtis McNeil, Eric Tyler, Ricky Veramontes, David Muncher, Martin Humberg, and Patrick Wilson. In distribution, we had Greg Mentor, Leland Kay, Matt Keeler. Our customer service staff that was available that day, we had Jason Ide, Jenny Downey, and fleet maintenance, Carl Hierly. So, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank
Oh,
you.
Also,
Yeah.
because it was Christmas, I brought a gift from the actual service line repair. The failure was deemed to be an improper installation. There's a leak on the flared 90, probably a pinhole leak that over time developed into something catastrophic. So I'll pass
Good.
this around.
Be careful, Pat may hit
yeah.
you with it.
Thank you. It does,
Don't use it as a gavel.
Is that a 3/4 inch pipe?
3/4 inch.
3/4 inch pipe had to shut down.
We had to shut
400
down
people.
the entire main
Wow.
and affected 520 people.
Well, thank you, Bill, and thank the employees
Appreciate it.
No,
for the board's
okay.
consideration too. We don't connect to our transmission mains anymore like that, so.
Good. A lesson learned, but we still have 400 and how many that are?
425 approximately.
Oh. Okay, well, thanks to the crew and the whole team. You heard customer service was in there, the crews were out there on a tremendous effort while the rest of us were sitting around the dining room table celebrating with our hoo pudding and roast beast. So I really appreciate, just shows the dedication of our team.
We have another one, Daniel Newsom will share with you our H.R. Labaudy Safety Award.
Good morning.
Howdy.
I'm Daniel Newsom, Safety Security Officer here at the district. Good to see some new faces. Hopefully I could paint a little bit of a picture of what our safety culture looks like here at the district. We recently had an employee, Pre Deachman, receive a H.R. Labaudy Safety Award presented by Aqua JPIA. With over 5 years of dedicated service to the district, Pre demonstrated exceptional initiative and creativity in resolving an ergonomic safety concern at the Camp Creek diversion structure. On the photo on the left there, you can see what the diversion structure looks like. This structure was built in the 1950s, and it features 2 manual gates operated by gearboxes with hand cranks that control water flows and diversions into Jenkinson Lake Reservoir. Operating these gates required staff to bend at the waist and turn the crank hundreds of times. I believe Pre told me it was about 400 times he had to turn that crank. All right, so this was a repetitive motion that posed significant ergonomic risks. Recognizing the challenge, Pre identified a portable, cordless hydrant and valve exerciser as a potential solution. Although not originally designed for this purpose, Pre adapted the tool for use with the gate mechanisms. In collaboration with the district's welding team, Pre designed a custom adapter which the team fabricated. This enabled the portable exerciser to securely connect to the gate controls and replace the manual hand crank. This result is a safer, more efficient system that allows operators to open and close the gates with a push of a button. This innovative solution eliminated awkward postures and repetitive motions, significantly reducing the risk of injury while reinforcing the district's commitment to 100% safety. So the photo there in the middle is what it looked like from the 1950s, and on the right you see the 2024 implementation there. So Pre's ability to identify and resolve a decades-old safety challenge demonstrates his dedication and promoting a culture of safety. His efforts align with Aqua JPIA's commitment to excellence program and advance the district's injury and illness prevention program, ensuring that workplace safety remains a top priority. In recognition of his achievement, Pre received a $250 Aqua JPIA check and is presented right now with the H.R. Labaudy Safety Award. On behalf of the management team and GM, it's our privilege to acknowledge Pre for his outstanding contribution to workplace safety and exemplifying the district's commitment to 100% safety.
That was absolutely a brilliant solution and only took, 50 years for someone to figure it out. But well done.
Yes, well done. Any other board comments? I got a question, I guess. Does that automatic or cordless exerciser work on our testing the other valves that are part of our system?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, that's actually what it was originally designed for. They call it the Valve Buddy tool. A common way that water treatment plant operators are hurt on the job is from strain from some of these valves that haven't been exercised in a long time. So it does have I guess you'd say, an adapter on it as well. So staff can actually push the button instead of trying to crank on those valves and, could lead to a shoulder strain.
Do we have more than one of those?
Let's see, Bill, do you know how many of those we have?
Yeah, we have some for the crews and the distribution operators.
Yeah.
Yes, we have them throughout the district. The crews and construction utilize them, and then also our distribution operators utilize them too.
Good. Thank you very much. Congratulations.
And we have one last one. It's associated with the JPIA. So Elizabeth, would you share the good news?
Good morning, President Dwyer, members of the board. Elizabeth Leeper, Senior Deputy General Counsel for the district. I will be briefly summarizing two summaries that were prepared by Jackie Noel, so our risk analyst for the district. She handles all of our insurance and claims, and I have the honor of being her supervisor. So I will be. Oh, more to come. So I won't provide all the detail that's included in the summary, but this is a recognition also by Aqua JPIA regarding members that have achieved certain milestones in their liability, property, and workers' compensation insurance programs. So this is essentially a 3-year look back at our liability claims that were submitted to Aqua JPIA. In this instance, they are recognizing anyone that has a loss ratio below 20%. Essentially, that's just a ratio of your claims and losses relative to the premiums that you paid. In this instance, our 3-year look back was 11.8%, so well below that 20% mark. And the good news, in addition to being acknowledged for that, is that directly goes into the calculation of future premiums. So in this instance, we did see a reduction in the liability premium relative to the prior year, which in insurance, you don't get to say that very much these days. And I just wanted to acknowledge that this obviously reflects our broader employee base in terms of 100% safety and just looking at opportunities to reduce liability for the district. So just wanted to acknowledge the efforts of everyone.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good job. Good job, team, and good job, employees.
Yes, thank you. And again, it just reflects the team effort to keep our employees and our facilities safe. Okay.
Then I have one last report after the public comment section.
Oh, okay. Then let's go ahead and open it up to public comment for items that are not on the agenda.
If members of the public would like to address the board for items not on today's agenda, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2. President Dwyer, it does not appear anybody is wishing to speak on items not on today's agenda.
Okay, then moving along, let's go to communications, and Jim, you're back on.
Actually, Elizabeth's back on. As part of the insurance program and the recovery effort, wanted to provide the board a summary, and I think this is probably final summary, depending on Flume 30's appeal that we're
Yes.
still working on, but I'll let you go ahead with that.
Well, once again, Elizabeth Leeper. We wanted to provide an update on 2 significant insurance claims that the district has been processing over the last few years. These did recently close out, so we wanted to provide a timely report on just the insurance recovery. So in particular, I wanted to highlight the Caldor fire claim, which we're all very familiar with. That started in August of 2021. Numerous district facilities suffered extensive damage, and we submitted that claim to Aqua JPIA as our property insurer. That involved both the physical damage to our assets as well as the loss of business income associated with not being able to generate hydropower while the flumes and canals were being rebuilt. So significant rebuilding effort. Ultimately, we submitted over 29 million in physical damages to our assets, as well as over 4 million in business loss income from hydropower. We were able to complete the physical repairs at the end of 2023. However, the insurance claim has been open throughout this whole period. So we had a total claim to our insurer of over $34 million. Ultimately, we were able to recover almost $23 million in insurance recovery. As you'll see, there is a gap that we're still trying to fill there. Our insurance for property is kind of a layered insurance where JPIA covers a portion and then they actually go to the reinsurance market for the remainder. Some of those reinsurers have exclusions for our flumes and canals, presumably in recognition that these are, they do have some risks associated with these assets. But it was a very significant insurance recovery, and staff continues to seek recovery from FEMA for the remainder of those losses. So that is also a lengthy process that I anticipate will probably be several more years. So yes, we would be happy to report on total recovery once FEMA wraps up, but I'll give you an example. We're still receiving FEMA payments from the 2017 storms, so that gives you a sense of the timeline for FEMA recovery. Secondary, I also wanted to just highlight the insurance recovery for the emergency echo conduit claim. So this was damages suffered during the early 2023 storms, where we had very significant snow loading that ultimately damaged the echo conduit. And so we did submit that claim to the insurer as well. Total claim of approximately $2.3 million, and this was effectively a complete recovery from insurance. So we received $2.3 million in insurance recovery. So very good results, and I just wanted to acknowledge the hard work of Jackie Noel, the risk analyst. Once again, she handles these claims obviously with support of staff, but it's largely her efforts that have resulted in this.
Good, great. Although then, it's kind of the flip side of what we heard about the JPIA and safety, is now we've made these claims, we can probably expect some of our insurance rates to increase.
Yes, so each of the premiums is calculated differently. So liability is largely calculated on our payroll and our prior claims on the liability side. On the property side, it's our insured assets and then essentially what the pool, it's a pooled insurance program, so they do look at the claims they've experienced and essentially what the pool needs to recover from, but it's less of a direct relationship to our particular claims. JPIA has indicated that we should expect approximately a 20% increase in property insurance year over year moving forward. And I think as we've seen just what's happening in the news, property insurance is going to continue to be a challenge in California for the foreseeable
Yeah.
future.
That'll be a challenge for Jamie in setting our new budget, won't it? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job on recovering what would be ratepayer money, so excellent.
Just a couple other tidbits, if I could. With the fires down in LA, I asked Dan to give me a brief report on the operational status of our fire hydrants. Anyone want to guess how many fire hydrants we have out there?
600.
Bunch.
6,728. All are operational except for, I think, 3, and they're in the process of being replaced. So that's really good news. Also, because, yes,
There it is. You're saying that they're going to be replaced, or in the process of being replaced on an annual basis, in a priority basis?
No, we have every 5 years, we go out and service them.
Okay,
When you see the paint, bright red painted fire hydrant.
I've seen
We've
that.
been there.
all right.
But out of the ones out in the field, I think one's a non-op. And then two, whatever reason, they're just not there. Our map shows they're there, but they're not, and we're investigating on why. But from the ones in the field, all are operational except for one, and I think in 2 weeks it's going to be replaced. So,
So a question, an additional question, is the community services areas, those are the fire boards or whatever, are being informed about these things, so there's communication going on?
Dan, do you want to talk a little bit about your upcoming meeting?
I'm going to be going to represent us a couple times in the very near future, and I just want to have some answers.
Yeah, no, thank you. Dan Corcoran, Operations Director. I'm going to maybe lean on Bill for a little bit of the technical aspects. So as to the meeting that Jim referred to, El Dorado County Fire Chiefs get together, I believe, once a month. We typically help participate in some of those questions. In light of the unfortunate events down south, they did actually ask us to come and have that conversation. But the conversation is ongoing, so I want to make that clear. And that we regularly participate in the FPO, Fire Prevention Officers, meetings with the technical staff. They actually have CAD electronic systems of all of our hydrants on their engines when they get dispatched. So this is just because of the recent events up to the policy level, but from an implementation level with our partners, we have 7 fire agencies we work with. That's a regular ongoing effort, a very closely coordinated effort. So.
Perfect, that's the answer I need.
Great. Anything else, Jim?
Also, Dan helped a little bit with Aqua in responding to the communications associated with the fires and how it impacts the public water agency. So thank you on that, Dan. And then lastly, because we've had such a dry January, we'll have a water supply update in the second meeting in February.
Okay, good.
And that concludes my report.
Yeah, I think we'll be getting a lot of attention on our fire preparation hydrant system, our ability to provide water from our sources, the lakes. So I think it's important for us to work with the fire districts and CAL FIRE to develop strategies on how do we deal with, the but what ifs. What if this is dry? How do we go mitigate those issues? So, yeah, keep up the good work.
And just as a reminder, with the Caldor fire, we participate in the incident command centers on coordination with fire response.
As it should be.
But I think the point is, it's important to note that fire hydrants are not intended for large wildland fires. They can deal with several structure fires and, helping in suppressing small wildland fires, but large conflagrations are beyond the ken of fire hydrants.
Oh, okay. Clerk, the board, Jennifer, do you have anything for us?
Nothing today, thank you.
Okay, good. Moving to Board of Director comments, I'll start. I think as we move into our second millennia of providing service, the district, if you've been reading Jesse's emails and posts and articles in the newspaper, the district has a long and interesting history and has gone through, we have survived, we and our predecessors have survived wildfires and landslides and other natural disasters and been able to continue to accomplish our mission of supplying quality, dependable water to our ratepayers. And I think as we move into the next 100 years, I think we're pretty well positioned with a strong board that are dedicated to the ratepayers and the long-term interest of the ratepayers. It's easy to be short-sighted, but sometimes those, quote, savings turn into a bigger expense in the future. But I think our board is We're diverse, we don't always agree, and that's probably a good thing, where we have alternative ideas. So I think the board is well-structured to move into the future. I think our general manager and the management team is the kind of the second leg of that three-legged stool that we're balancing on. And I think we are really well-positioned to move into the future. And as you just heard from all the awards, I think our staff is tremendous, dedicated to the mission, and we're pretty fortunate. That doesn't mean that it's going to be an easy ride. We're facing a lot of challenges in the future, a lot of unknowns. One of them is hiring a new general manager is going to be tough, and we need to find somebody of the same caliber that we have, or better.
Hard to find. They broke the mold.
So we have that challenge of finding new leadership at the top. We have the challenge of as you've heard, our aging infrastructure. We're going to be playing catch-up on, not catch-up like French fries, but catch-up on replacing that aging infrastructure. Way too many breakages and unplanned outages, and because a system that was designed to have a 50 or 60-year lifespan, we're now pushing 70 years on those systems, and we need to try to balance playing the catch-up on replacing those systems with the other big capital demands that we have. And then we have, speaking of big capital demands, the big projects like replacing dams and doing those kind of things are going to be challenges for us, but I think we're well positioned to meet those challenges and prosper in the next 100 years, or somebody is, not me. Okay, any other board comments?
Yeah.
Yes, Alan?
Yeah, so I got a few calls when the Palisades fires and the other fires in LA broke out. I was getting calls from people asking, well, why would they shut off the fire hydrants? I just don't get it. What's wrong with that water department down there? So I had to give tutorials on how water pressure works and how the water tanks up there work, and when the system is overused, when they open up dozens of fire hydrants all at once. So I was thinking, I always come up with these ideas for you, Jesse, but I think we need to maybe educate our ratepayers on how the system works, how the pressure system works, how what it can handle, what it can't handle. And I think that would be useful this year. We may be going into a dry year ourselves. That would be useful to help educate people on what to expect from the system and what not to expect. The other thing I'd like to request from staff is maybe sometime this summer, can we do a board report on wildfire contingency plans of what the district is prepared for? Pat, as you said, what of this, what of that? So for instance, this may seem random, but I live in the area, and the water intake facility at Folsom Lake is down in a fairly kind of isolated area. It's state park land, it's a heavily wooded residential area. What if a wildfire was coming from the south, headed straight towards it? How would the crews there get out, for instance? It might be tough. It's a narrow road for part of the ways. So do we, again, I say it may seem random, but how about an emergency inflatable raft so they can head out to the lake, rather than trying to head into the fire? And probably the most likely direction of a fire would be, a lot of the prevailing winds are from south to north. So that's just one example. But if we could look at maybe developing some contingency plans, and also how to keep the system running. And we're talking with fire chiefs, but how do we keep the system running as best we can without putting our crews in, there's going to be always some risk, but how can we help our communities and our fire chiefs suppress fires as quickly as possible recognizing that we can't handle, 100-mile-an-hour winds and multiple fires all at once is not the system. No urban system is designed for that. But anyhow, I would like to see maybe a report this summer of contingency plans and what ifs.
Be happy to do that. Our staff, with Dan taking the lead on it, we do a wildfire emergency response planning session and actually a mock drill on those type of things, whether it's shelter in place, whether it's evacuations in different areas. So we can prepare that and bring something to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Day. Before we leave that, the dry hydrants, I was thinking, as unintended consequences, as the building code now calls for all houses to have the sprinkler systems in there, when a fire of that magnitude happens, all those sprinkler systems go on and drain what available water there is as well. So it's a tough situation. Yeah, Director Anzini.
I agree with you on that one, because that is part of the illustrious of having a very, very wealthy income and being able to do your own fire prevention. And the unfortunate thing is those people who are in the bottom of the hill did not have that advantage. I'm changing the subject a little bit because it goes back to what Director Day was talking about. I'd love to see a little bit, the education of our ratepayers is really important. And last year you did several tours, which I got feedback from many people, said it was wonderful to know, especially people who move into this area need to understand where our water comes from, especially at the bottom of our district. The understanding of how it goes and how does it get to my faucet. That's really important, but I think another thing that we could do, and this would be on our public information, public education, is videos are wonderful. And there are a number of people in El Dorado County who now provide how-to videos. And the videos from our staff on how the water gets down from Lake Aloha. And another video on how the water gets into Sly Park and what we do to get it there and what happens with a diversion and what is our power plant. And they could be cartoons, because it really becomes easy to do a 3 or 5 minute video that our ratepayers could do. And I think it's probably worth a fortune. The fortune to do it, but it's not that expensive anymore. And a lot of how-to things from the California Department of Water Resources are up there. These videos I share with ratepayers when they ask me questions, and they love it. So to even put them on our website would be good. An opportunity for people to, when you send your link out regarding the newsletters, and that just gives them a common information that will help them. But I'd love to see employees in the water system. So, that's just an idea, and thank you for bringing up the education part.
Thank you, Director Anzini. Other comments? Director?
Well, first of all, in getting to know the district, staff has been gracious enough to take us on several tours. On Friday, I wanted to take an in-depth tour of my division and other things to be able to better function here. So on Friday, with Dan and Tracy and Bill and Martin and John and several other of the staff, we spent time at the Corporation Yard, which is on the agenda today. Went to the Camino Heights wastewater treatment site, Strawberry and Forbay, and again, most appreciated. It's my 4th tour of the assets around here, and I'm always impressed on how extensive and complex, and as Director Dwyer indicated, the aging infrastructure just keeps coming up. One of the other things that's just struck home to me is this is not a set it and forget it type system. Everything is being monitored throughout the process. They follow the water hither and yon, and it really is impressive in how complex the whole facility is. I want to emphasize and concur with Director Anzini on the need for an aggressive public information education. I think that's something that we really need to do. And talking about tours and meetings and, using media to its greatest extent. It's been interesting, and as I told all the staff and all the briefings we've had, I probably retained around 20% of it because it is so complex. Maybe by the end of the 4 years, I'll have a pretty good handle on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All righty, is there any, I guess that was our report, so we don't have a public comment on that. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve the consent? Okay. Anybody want to pull anything off consent calendar? No?
Always ask.
Yeah, good. All right, then I'll need a motion to approve the consent.
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Thank you, Director.
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, any other board comments on consent calendar? Any public comment on the consent calendar?
If members of the public would like to address the board on the approval of today's consent calendar, please refer to the instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the approval of today's consent calendar, moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Mansfield. I believe that we are ready for the vote.
Okay, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Moving on to information items, number 8. Patrick, you're going to give us an update on the strawberry. Where did Angel go? This is. Uh-oh.
Consent, I move to approve.
Yeah.
Good morning, Board. Patrick Wilson, Senior Civil Engineer for the district, providing a strawberry water system history and a fire hydrant operations update on this informational item. No previous board action. So summary of the issue. So the system includes treatment, storage, and also the distribution in the strawberry community, which is 149 water service connections. And in addition to those connections, there are fire hydrants attached to that the drinking water system. There's 15 wharf hydrants. There are a handful of those in the main system as well, just for reference, kind of in the Dolomite area. And those are a 2 to 2.5 inch, depending on size, steel riser pipe with a approximate 2 inch, they vary in size, fire hydrant connection, if you will, to a standard 2.5 inch fire hydrant hose. Those also vary. Not all of those have a fire hydrant connection. Some of them have adapters accordingly. As compared to a steamer hydrant, and there's 6 of those in Strawberry, those are the standard ones that you'll see around town. They're a dry barrel and in some cases wet barrels, depending on where you are in the state. Those are a 6-inch main that's feeding those with typically a 5 1/4 inch connection to it. Some of the older.
What's a dry barrel versus a wet?
Yeah, absolutely. So a dry barrel system, when you actually turn the fire hydrant all the way off, the hydrant itself drains water out. A wet barrel system is wet all the way up to the individual valves. So on a wet barrel fire hydrant, there's typically 3. So there's the main valve for a 4.5 to 5 1/4 inch connection, and then there's 2 2.5 inch connections. Each one of those has their own individual valve on a wet barrel, and they're always wet 24/7, 365. The only reason that the district utilizes dry barrels so much is because we do deal with the freeze and thaw element. Those wet barrels have a tendency to freeze, crack, and leak.
Keep the water pressure down, underground, and then you can open it when needed.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And due to the design of the system, there's limited flow that's available for the fire hydrants that are attached to the Strawberry system. The Strawberry Fire Safe Council approached the board regarding the desire to assist with the fire suppression system maintenance and operation, and that was during the last board meeting, and Director Dwyer had requested today's presentation. So some background. So district ownership began in December of 1968, which included a river pump station, which was raw water, 2 54,000-gallon redwood storage tanks, and a booster pump station, which pumped from one storage tank to the upper storage tank. Treatment consisted of disinfection with chlorine at the lower tank, so no filtration at this time was involved. There was no backup power, which in addition to some very low and shallow pipelines led to substantial freezing during the winter and a lot of challenges operating that system. On the right-hand side there, that's a photo from the 1992 report, which I'll get to, or excuse me, 1993 report, which I'll get to in a moment, and a little bit later, I should say. But that's a photo from one of the original raw water pumps that pumped up to that lower 54,000-gallon tank.
How old was it when we acquired it?
It kind of varies in age. So a lot of it was, so from what I could tell, in 1967, the Strawberry Municipal Water Company came to the board and had requested the board, the district to take over the system. At that time, the board was not reluctant, but they wanted to do some more investigation. So for that following year in 1967, they took on effectively a report at that point where they quantified the valuation of the system and the operation of the system and whether or not the district would ultimately take it on, which we did in 1968. From the best that I can tell from the records that were provided from the Strawberry Municipal Water Company, it was late 50s, early 60s, sometime in that vintage. The documentation is really just a one-page drawing. And so you're trying to piece together a lot of information from that. Ultimately, I don't have the exact date in terms of age. Next slide. So the California Health and Safety Code was adopted in 1976, and that also applied to the main system as well, in Outingdale and in this case, Strawberry. And so what that meant was making some substantial changes to that system, which I'll get to a little bit later, in order to meet those requirements. In 1986, a horizontal well was drilled, which produced about 5 gallons a minute. Just for reference, there were some springs that were attached to the system. At that time, the district was looking at trying to find a secure water source that wouldn't require additional treatment options, and they drilled this horizontal well. Ultimately, that was not successful at 5 gallons a minute. In 1990, the district received a loan and a grant totaling $445,000 for the water system improvements. That was from the California Department of Public Health, now known as the Division of Drinking Water, which had expressed an increasing concern about the quality of the water source and the level of treatment. As mentioned, there was no filtration going at this time, so it was raw water, injection of chlorine provided to customers. That simple. On the right there, on the top, you can see that's one of the 54,000-gallon tanks. That's the lower tank. And on the left is the booster pump station and the chlorine injection location, where as the water was pumped from the raw water building into that lower tank, they injected chlorine at that site. Next slide. So in 1991, in the continued search for securable water, the district drilled 2 wells, which had a combined yield of 150 gallons a minute. The water quality, however, showed an exceedance of iron, manganese, radon, and uranium, and ultimately the cost of treating for those chemicals far outweighed the benefit of actually going to a surface water treatment plant. Therefore, the district proceeded with the design of a surface water treatment plant, and ultimately, during that time period, the roof collapsed and the foundation ultimately failed on the upper 54,000-gallon redwood tank, and it was taken out of service. So at this time, they were just using that lower pump station to pump to the upper area, and they were solely maintaining the operation of that lower 54,000-gallon tank, which was in the previous slides. In 1992, a house located near the lower 54,000-gallon tank was ultimately destroyed, and that was due in part to inadequate fire flow, as documented in the report. On the right, that's a capped well at one of the locations that the district actually drilled and pumped from and tested, and ultimately decided to go with surface water treatment after sampling. Next slide. So in 1993, the district completed the Strawberry Water System Planning Report. Ultimately, it identified that the system did not meet surface water treatment rule, and the hydrants were incapable of sustained fire flow at higher elevations. It also identified that the pipelines were inadequate for providing proper fire protection, and it recommended that the wharf hydrants should be replaced with steamer hydrants. Ultimately, that would require the replacement of some piping. I'll get to a map a little bit later that will kind of lay out the system a little bit more. So on the right there, that's a photo from the upper booster station. So there was one that's adjacent to the lower 54,000-gallon tank. So that would pump water up to what was the 54,000-gallon tank, but was taken out of service. And continuing on, so that recommended replacement in order to increase the flow for those fire hydrants as well as replacing those wharf hydrants was 4,600 feet of 3-inch pipe that needed to be replaced, and the recommendation was 6-inch pipe at that time. It also included a design and an understanding of upgrading the river pump station, which is actually shown there on the right. So that's the original pump station from the 1960s, and that pump station itself was ultimately upgraded with the treatment plant itself. So in September of 1993, the construction contract was released. A new water treatment plant was constructed. A dedicated contact pipeline was ultimately constructed as well. What this consisted of is taking treated water from the water treatment plant in Strawberry and directly pumping that into the storage tank, which is a new 200,000-gallon storage tank, which I have a photo of a little bit later. And what that allowed was the adequate time to meet the state's requirement for disinfection, and that was solely done by repurposing some old pipeline that was built in the 1960s and dedicating it up to the tank with some additional new piping as well. And this also project abandoned some of the 4-inch shallow pipeline that was very prone to freezing conditions. So there's the storage tank on the right. That's the new 200,000-gallon tank. And on the bottom right there is actually the membrane skid that is in operation now, the treatment plant. So some of the operation of the Strawberry has been a bit challenging over the years, as you can imagine, not just from conditions-based, whether it be snow, heavy snow, or heavy rain events, but as the facility continues to increase in age, there's challenges meeting the Stage 2 disinfection byproducts rule, which includes total trihalomethanes, haloacetic acids. We're required to sample quarterly in this system. And in order to maintain adequate water for the customers in the area, we must flush to minimize the water age in the distribution system. So next slide. So how much water are we
Patrick?
at? Yeah.
For purpose of people that don't understand disinfection byproducts, could you just do a quick, say why when you chlorinate, you're going to get bad stuff coming out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 30,000-foot level is effectively, treatment plants are good. They're not great at removing total organic carbon from the drinking water itself. Some of it visible, some of it not to the naked eye. And so the ability to remove that carbon is paramount. And so when a system such as the membrane skid that we have there doesn't do an excellent job of removing organics, when you add chlorine to that water itself, it can actually cause disinfection byproducts, which are perceived and tested, I should say, known to be leading to potential carcinogens in the drinking water, so potentially cancerous causing from the disinfection itself. And that's from chlorine reacting with the remaining organics that were not removed from the treatment plant itself.
Thank you.
Yep. So in 2024, how much water were we flushing? We averaged about 31%. Of the water that was produced had to be flushed out of the Strawberry system in order to maintain the disinfection byproduct rule. This was refined from 2021, where we had to flush approximately 53% of the water that was produced. So in 2017, Development Services was asked to provide a fire flow for the Strawberry Lodge, which is pictured to the right, out of that steamer hydrant that's there. The Strawberry Lodge was looking at doing some renovations and continued to work with the fire department on how to do so. And so this was an opportunity for staff to calibrate the water model. And the flow was completed at a steamer hydrant, as mentioned, right in front of the lodge there. What was found was a maximum flow rate of 118 gallons per minute, which ultimately confirmed the 1993 report. So 118 gallons a minute is very low, just for reference. Mostly in the main system, within reason, you're looking at about 500 gallons a minute. Really depends on the system area. The new construction and the newer developed areas are closer to 1,250 to 1,500 gallons a minute, depending on the hydrants. So it does vary across all these systems that we have and that we operate. However, even to that scale, this is a very low fire flow number, just for reference. Next slide. So how is it that low? This is one of the challenges. Can I borrow that for a second? Sorry, John. Well, I guess I'm special. Thank you, John. So just for reference for the board, so this is an overview map of the entire Strawberry water system. So right here in this location is the water treatment plant. This darkened line that's a little bit difficult to see is the contact pipeline. It goes around all the way up to the new 200,000 gallon tank, which was constructed in 1993. We have an 8-inch line that leaves the tank, comes down to a steamer hydrant, which then that 8-inch line ties into a 3-inch pipe that is looped on Margaret Drive. So that 3-inch pipe ultimately feeds all the residents on the south side of Highway 50, as well as all the customers that are around Margaret Drive. That 3-inch line is very undersized, as was mentioned in the 1993 report, and that is the primary reason that we have the limitations with the fire flow. The fire flow is conducted at this fire hydrant, this steamer hydrant that's here, at the Strawberry Lodge. So as you can see, all water has to be fed out of this 8-inch pipe into this 3-inch and ultimately across Highway 50. For reference, the yellow color, green and red are pressures. So this is a single pressurized system, so it's all fed from gravity from that tank. And so you can just see, yellow is about 70 to 100 PSI, green's about 101, to 130, and red is 131 to 160 PSI. On the very end of the system down here is our auto flusher. That's what was photographed in the previous slide that's showing how we actually flush the water out of the system. So it dechlors the water prior to entering the waterway, which is the American River in this case. So we actually have to continually operate that system, go up and monitor, and actually perform a self-check to make sure that we're in compliance. All that being said is we're effectively monitoring and maintaining the water system to meet drinking water standards. So some fire hydrant background. In September of 2020, the first documented fire hydrant service was completed for the Strawberry area. In 2021, the Strawberry Fire Safe Council met with staff and the El Dorado County Fire. Staff had identified that it maintains the hydrants, but not the structures covering the wharf hydrants themselves. In August of 2023, the Strawberry Fire Safe Council identified 4 wharf hydrants that did not have the correct adapters. So as I had prior mentioned, those wharf heads, they can vary in terms of their connection and their threading. And ultimately, the fire department is going to show up with a 2.5-inch or 4.5-inch hose on their truck. So there's some adapters that were needed to be located for those 4. In May of 2024, the district replaced the 4 wharf heads with a new style not requiring the adapter. So on the right there is the cover for the Strawberry wharf hydrants. And you can see the wharf hydrant is directly pictured in the middle there. And there's some hose to the left as well. Next slide. So in October of 2024, the Strawberry Fire Safe Council requested that 9 additional wharf hydrants be replaced. Staff at this time decided to complete a full preventative maintenance on all Strawberry fire hydrants. As mentioned in some prior presentations today, we're on a 5-year rotation to get out and to maintain these fire hydrants. And so we did it a little early, but in the advent of trying to make sure that we're meeting the requirements of these hydrants. We did find that 2 of the wharf hydrants needed to be replaced. The district provided its findings to the Fire Safe Council and notified the Fire Safe Council that they could not operate the hydrants. Next slide. So in December of 2024, staff reached out to Strawberry Fire Safe Council to discuss their concerns. The hydrants, as mentioned, cannot be operated prior to the fire department arriving on site per Health and Safety Code 106-875. And the real importance of that is the operation of the system. So our primary goal as a drinking water is to maintain drinking water compliance with the system. And ultimately, as those have said this morning, Director Penn and even Director Day, these systems were not designed to deal with wildland fires. They were designed to deal with a single house structure at best. This system itself is really not even designed for that. At 118 gallons a minute, there's not enough flow for most fire hydrants, most firefighters to fight most of the fires that could potentially become to these systems. A lot of that has to do with the distribution network and the size of that piping. With a full 200,000 gallon tank and a properly sized pipeline, absolutely a fire can be obtained. But just like any system that we operate, there's fluctuations in tank volume. And ultimately, there's changes, minor, of course, in pressure in these systems. So ultimately, the flow is not available to fight any sort of major fires in the system.
Question for you. Correct me if I'm wrong. The 118 number you came up with, was it the higher pressure zone? Is that correct?
Yes.
So we could expect potentially lower flows in the yellow zone on your map?
Potentially, yes, because you're going to have less driving head to push through that hydrant. The steamer hydrant that's at the very top of the system that's closest to the tank is fed off a dedicated 8-inch line leaving that tank. It likely has the largest fire flow for this system. Obviously, once you step down into that 3-inch piping, you're absolutely right. You're going to lose the driving nature of that. We also reference administration regulations 1040 and 1070, which is, operation of the system and maintenance of it as well. Operation of the system and minimizing that from an outside perspective, outside of emergency personnel and district licensed personnel. Staff discussed the maintenance of the hydrants as the responsibility of the district per AR 5012 and discussed the importance of maintaining the integrity of the system for drinking water. Ultimately, that's the goal and the requirements that we're held to as a district in maintaining and operating these systems. Staff continues to have open communication with the Strawberry Fire Safe Council.
Patrick, those regulations that are preventing us allowing Strawberry to operate the hydrants, those are state regulations, is that true?
Well, no, we have our own internal ARs that we have written to protect the district from any potential for contamination. So the reason that we have those is primarily to maintain the operation, the integrity of our system. There are state requirements with respect to licensed distribution operators that operate the system. Obviously, there's leeway for emergency personnel to operate, during an emergency condition. Even with training conditions, we are in close communication with the fire departments when they want to do those, because there's certain times of the year we cannot take on that risk and liability. So even on a programmatic perspective, we're maintaining an open communication there with the fire department to minimize any potential risks for health and public safety of the district.
Thank you.
Yep.
So this is one of the things we took on the tour, and it's challenging and, recognize that this is, one of the big issues is the distance that fire departments have to travel in order to fight structure fire. And because Strawberry is so isolated from the closest fire stations. And I understand the concern of the Strawberry community. And, I just don't see a really good solution to this. And then one of the requests from the Strawberry Fire Safe Council and folks up there is they'd like to take a tour of the system. So I'd like to request that a tour of the system be arranged for the community members so they can see up close and personal and, what's going on there.
I guess from your presentation, it looks like the earlier board decision to acquire Strawberry water system at their request at that time was probably not a good economic decision for El Dorado Irrigation District, as now the other ratepayers are actually subsidizing a system that's very expensive that only serves a few community members. But I guess that's looking backwards, and we should look forwards. Say, any other board comments? Okay.
No, it's just a difficult situation up there. I mean, 3-inch lines won't provide much flow at all. And I wish we had a lot of money to be out there replacing lines and all that, but it's just,
Cost prohibitive.
exactly. But we can certainly hold a tour up there and share with them the locations and the system and all that.
Any public comment on this item?
Good morning, EID Board of Directors and staff. My name is Angel Ball, and I'm a resident of Strawberry. Patrick, I have a lot more questions. I want to thank you for the history of the water system in Strawberry, and on behalf of the community, I would like to add a few more details, because as they say, there's more to the story. In the beginning, EID's summary of issues states in the 5th sentence why the Strawberry Fire Safe Council or the residents of Strawberry attended the last meeting. We attended the EID Board of Director meeting on December 9th for the purpose of bringing the November 14th email to your attention and to request that EID honor the partnership and relationship and commitments made so that we can continue to protect our community in the event of a fire. I would like to move to page 3, second paragraph that begins in September of 2020. The record should include that the May of 21 meeting in Strawberry was a community meeting which EID was the guest speaker for the purpose of answering questions the community had about the system. The El Dorado Fire Protection District was a guest speaker for the purposes of educating us on ladder fuel and creating defensible space. I want to be clear, it was not an agency meeting and there was no joint discussion between EID, the Fire Protection District, and the members of the community. And then beginning in August of 23, the sentence there, the record should include, in July 21, a picture of the needed adapters was sent to EID, and EID explained they were not available in their warehouse and suggested I go to Ferguson's and purchase them. Moving forward 2 years, in August of 2023, I shared with EID that we had been to 6 retail outlets over the last 2 years and were not able to find the adapters. We asked if we could get new globe valves. EID stated if your community can purchase lead-free replacement valves, EID staff can interrupt water service and install them for you. In April of 2024, I informed EID we had procured the needed valves, and in May of 24, they installed them. In June of 24, I asked EID to replace the other 9, and they agreed after the busy season was over. I hope sharing our perspective reveals the active role that EID played while working with the Fire Safe Council over the last 4 years. In closing, my heart breaks for the Californians that have been devastated by the fires in the Pacific Palisades and Altadena. The Fire Safe Council is committed to our mission to work with all agencies to reduce and mitigate the possibility of this type of disaster becoming part of our history. Thank you.
Thank you, Angel.
Yeah, good morning, board, staff. Greg Ball, Strawberry Fire Safe Council. I hope that we have provided a more complete understanding of the actions of the Strawberry Fire Safe Council and EID. Our purpose for being here today is to not dispute. As a matter of fact, the report is good. It's to add additional facts to the report to provide that picture. The other thing we definitely want to continue to do is to continue the spirit of cooperation that I personally talked about in December when we were here. And that spirit of cooperation, by working together to find some creative solutions, to kind of paraphrase what President Dwyer said, is maybe looking forward as opposed to looking backward. But we want to find some creative solutions that enhance and not limit the tools that can prevent the spread of wildfire. And the past is the past, but there have been some historical events, and I just want to say that the idea of fighting a wildland fire or a wildfire with that system is unreal, and it's not what we've talked about. What we talk about is stopping a spread of a fire, which has been done with those systems in past years, and to do our very best to make sure that Lake Tahoe area doesn't become a Pacific Palisades area. And that's what it's always been about, is preventing the spread. With us today, I'd also like to introduce the Vice President of our Strawberry Fire Safe Council, Mr. Justin Pitcher in the corner. And what he and I would like to do is just propose we continue dialogue with whoever EID designates to meet with us. And I believe you're the gentleman, Patrick, that we spoke with on the phone. I think a very good conversation and very valuable to us. So we want to keep the door open. We want to keep that communication going. The tour I had on here, thanks to Paul Penn for mentioning that. And, you know, we can only learn from one another and therefore help one another. And so part of this is what I think is dawning on me is, you know, we're going to need your help to educate our community on that system, because I was in Strawberry as a kid in 1967 and 68, and this stuff went on around me. I was 12 years old, you know, but over the years I still have I've returned to Strawberry and have friends that have been there that time, and none of us had the historical perspective that was provided by some of the records. We have a lot of legend and lore and myth and those kind of things. And so being able to share this kind of thing with the community, I think will benefit us as a fire safe council, but in particular, it'll benefit EID, because instead of it being they're just saying no or we can't do it, creates a deeper understanding of what all's involved in that water system. So with that said, I'll stop my running of my yap and say, in a spirit of cooperation, we want to continue the dialogue. And thank you for your time.
Great, appreciate that, and I'm sure that the board and the staff will continue that dialogue.
Right. And whatever we can do to come up with creative solutions, happy to explore. And just one note, Strawberry Fire Safe Council needs to be commended for the vegetation management around the area. You know, you are in a very vulnerable and exposed, circumstance with Forest Service land around you, Highway 50, and all those, factors. So however we can work together, let's keep doing it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other public comment?
If members of the public would like to address the board on information item number 8, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer does not appear. Any additional members of the public would like to address the board on information item number 8 with no action taken. I believe we're ready for information item number 9.
Okay, let's move on and let's get schooled by our council on how to be good board members.
Some props, actually. I promised Director Day that I would make this not as long as the last one. So you can expect this to be a little shorter, hopefully a lot shorter. Thank you, members of the board and the public that's here with us today. I'm Brian Polson. I'm the district's general counsel, and I'm going to provide a presentation today that's kind of in the theme of the sort of board orientation that we began with at the last meeting. Today's topic is going to be about the board members' roles and responsibilities as they relate to the district's bylaws as set forth in the bylaws, and also our meeting procedures, and in particular, just a brief summary of Robert's Rules of Order, since that's something that we utilize heavily in these meetings. So with that, as I mentioned, I did a presentation at the last board meeting along these same lines. That presentation focused on the Brown Act, the Public Records Act, and the state's conflicts of interest laws as a informational item to bring, especially the new board members, but all of our board members up to or back up to speed on these topics as they relate to board member roles and responsibilities. So today's presentation, I'm going to summarize the roles and responsibilities of board members contained in the bylaws. I'm going to talk about the meeting procedures that are also contained in the bylaws and elsewhere, and then, as I said, briefly summarize relevant topics under Robert's Rules of Order. So I'll begin with the bylaws. Just a few slides here, a couple of things that I wanted to highlight for you. As with any corporation, the district has bylaws that govern its operations and set forth the roles and responsibilities of its board members and staff. In Board Policy 12010, and I'll just to say first that the bylaws are contained within the board-adopted policies as the last series in those policies. So if you open up the board policies, they're extensive, and they begin with the series 100, and they move all the way down until you get to the series of the basically 12,000. They're not numbered that way, but effectively. The bylaws are contained in this series, and Board Policy 12010 sets forth the purpose of the bylaws as it relates to the board's role, which is to provide board-directed rules for the conduct of the board members and meetings of the board of directors. A couple of the duties that I wanted to highlight: the board's role is to provide oversight and direct the implementation of the district's mission. It will do so through deciding and monitoring policy and fiscal matters, which is why when the district, most of the board meetings are spent with the board providing policy direction or fiscal oversight, if you will, to the district or to the district's management through, the approval of contract award, through the allocation of funding, and so on and so forth. Sometimes district staff seek board policy direction on other matters unrelated to those that are fiscal in nature, such as, for example, legislative direction or positions on proposed legislation and those kinds of things. Board members are to use the following methods to address their concerns. First and foremost, advise the general manager, work through board committees when necessary, and then present specific recommendations to the entire board for action when necessary. I wanted to highlight here that the board under the policy should be guided by a desire to achieve and support the district's mission in a constructive way. Next slide, please. I'm not going to read every bullet point on here, but I wanted to highlight this for you and refer you to the relevant board policy, particularly to the new members, to help kind of inform you about what the bylaws and policies say as it relates to board member activities. A couple of points I do want to just draw your attention to. The first one is that the board as a whole is the entity of authority. So no individual board member has authority to speak on behalf of or act on behalf of the district. Board Policy 12030 indicates that all communications on behalf of the board should be made by the board president, unless the board president, in the board president's absence, the board as a whole delegates that authority to one member of the board or to its management staff. And then the other point here I wanted to just highlight is the very bottom one here, that the board members don't have the individual authority to direct staff except through the board as a whole. So, each of you develops relationships with staff, and that's great, and you go on tours, but and there will be times where you'll be tempted to say, oh, well, I know our operations director, he took me on a great tour, I'm just going to call him up and have him work on this issue that the customer has brought to my attention. The board policies really are direct the board to work through the general manager, because you can imagine that puts the operations director or whomever on the district staff in an awkward position to then inform the general manager that, oh, this is what I'm doing on behalf of the board, right? Better to work through the general manager, notify the general manager, hey, I had a customer call, they're concerned about this, and then allow the general manager to do as you've delegated, which is to work through his or her staff to make sure that item is addressed. Next slide, please. The board has adopted a code of ethics. This is enshrined in the bylaws in Board Policy 12040. Again, I'm not going to read all of these here, but just to draw your attention to a couple of them. The one district mentality here that board members, in addition to giving consideration for the needs and wants of their own constituents, they should be thinking broadly about the district as a whole, right? This is our one board mentality. And then there will be times, and President Dwyer referenced that there's a diversity of thought and opinion on this board, and the board doesn't always act as in a rote way. That's a good thing. There will be times when any one of you members of the board might find yourself in the minority of opinion on a particular item, and that's okay. But when that's the case, as the Code of Ethics indicates, that a board member should respect the divergent opinions that are presented and the actions ultimately taken by the board. Okay. Before I move on, those are the points I wanted to highlight from our bylaws as it relates to the board's roles and responsibilities. Before I pivot over to the meeting procedures, I did want to just, and here's my prop, I wanted to just bring your attention to this item. This is called the El Dorado Irrigation District Board of Directors Code of Conduct. This document here was developed in a workshop of the board in 2019, and ultimately after the workshop it was adopted by the board. It is not included in the bylaws. That's something that the board might want to consider as a future item. But the Code of Conduct was intended for the board to collaboratively develop how it wished to interact with one another when it participated in these public meetings. So, for example, since it's not included in the packet here, I'll just briefly read these points. It's short, so that those participating remotely have the benefit here. But the Code of Conduct includes some terms that the board felt were important that reflected the way it wanted to engage. Those include collaborative, knowledgeable, dedicated, results-driven, professional, proud, and team-driven. And then there are some clauses here that the board adopted to reflect its conduct, and they are consistently practice open-minded and proactive communications, recognize the duty and interest of each board member to serve ratepayers, employees, and the community as one district. We kind of talked about that in the bylaws. Consistently model professional, respectful, and courteous behavior. Commit to proactive policy engagement with priority EID issues and projects. And then finally, encourage collaborative, imaginative, and long-term solutions. And, thinking back on this document, which I think was really visionary on the part of the board that adopted it, I was reflecting on my own experience having participated in the workshop there. And the thing that I recall that I really took away from that workshop was that the board wanted to give each other and the staff the benefit of the doubt. That recognize that each one of you and the staff is really dedicated to the mission and trying to achieve the mission, even when we see it differently from one another. So let's give each other the benefit of the doubt that we're all trying to row in the same direction, and when disagreements come up, we work through them collaboratively as set forth in those policies.
Brian, if Yeah, I think it's really important, having been here for a while and been through some pretty contentious issues over the years. And the biggest thing that we've learned, past board and current board members, I think, is to recognize, even though you may feel passionately about something and disagree vehemently about another board member's position on it, you all have to recognize that I think we're all here to serve the better purpose, so our intentions are good. And I think if you recognize that a person's intentions are good, even though you don't agree with their solution, that can help calm things down and allow for healthier dialogue. So I think it's important for us to always recognize, even though we may disagree, everybody's intentions are good.
Thank you, Director Day. Also, I'd like to recognize Director Anzini, who was really the catalyst behind that off-site meeting that developed those things that you read from us on the chart. And I think it helped move the board out of the mire of finger pointing and disagreement into pulling in the same direction, trying to make this district the best that we can and serve our ratepayers the best that we can. I'd like to point out one other thing. The last bullet on this slide, it looks like fun to come sit here in the board meetings and make grand decisions. This is fun? Yes, this is a lot of fun. But you have to do your homework, and I'd implore our board members to take the packet and read it carefully. You know, these packets, for the community that doesn't know, are frequently hundreds of pages. And to review those packets,
388.
308, and that's a light.
388 right here.
So, yes,
The attachments.
appreciate you, the board members, doing their homework and being prepared to bring issues and items up during the meeting. Having said that, I would also ask the board, if there's something in the excellent board packet that Jennifer prepares for us to help us be educated, that if you see something that's a concern, I'd really encourage you to contact Jim to say, you know, I don't understand this, why are we doing this? So that it's not a gotcha during this meeting, it's you can get some background information. You can still have your opinion that we respect and voice it, but I don't think it's good to spring surprises on the staff or management. Give them a chance to review and discuss, and of course, you're always welcome to talk to me, but I can only do one of you, and that's it. So if you want to keep the brown.
Lunch today.
Yeah. So thank you.
Can I,
Thank you for that. I
can I
appreciate
just mention one thing? I'm sorry, before you proceed. In light of what Director Dwyer said, I appreciate that, but in no way is President Dwyer, Jim, or any staff member discouraging you from asking questions, the same questions during the board meeting. We never discourage the asking of questions, but sometimes there may be a question that hasn't been considered, and instead of just posing the question during the board meeting, then staff can actually be prepared to answer that question. But in no way do we intend any board member or any member of the public not to ask a question in a public forum ever.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on then to the next part, which is the meeting procedures. If you go to the next slide, thanks. There we go. Board Policy 12080 summarizes the district's meeting procedures. It requires the use of Robert's Rules, and it refers to the Brown Act's agenda requirements as well. So I haven't, as I did on the last slides, taken the language from that policy. It's lengthy, and so I'm going to just summarize some of the important parts on the next few slides. As we talked about at length, the Brown Act governs the district's, or the board's assembly here, and when the board meets in a public meeting, the Brown Act requires that it publish in advance an agenda that sets forth each item that is to be discussed or transacted. And every one of those must be briefly described on the agenda to give the public the benefit of knowing in advance what the board will be considering, discussing, and taking action upon. The Brown Act is explicit that no item that is not agendized may be discussed except as specifically enumerated in the bullet points that I've included here on this slide. So for example, on items that are not on the agenda, board members may briefly respond to a statement made or a question posed by the public. They may ask a question or for clarification, make a brief announcement, such as, for example, when you report on your activities. And that's the very next bullet, make a brief report on activities. And then there's a few more, and I'm not going to read every single one of these, but I included them here because this is not a list of that includes but is not limited to. This is limited to these. The Brown Act limits to these bullet points when and in what circumstance a board member and the board can discuss an item that does not appear on the agenda. Next slide, please. The Brown Act is also very specific about when an action may be taken on an item that does not appear on the published agenda. And those include three circumstances. One, in an emergency. And the emergency is defined, but think of it as a really big deal. The next is when there's not an emergency, but there is a need to take immediate action, and the need for that action came about after, or it came to the attention of the district after the agenda was published. In that circumstance, 2/3 of the board must decide by vote that there is an urgent there's a need to take urgent action, and that came to the attention of the district after the agenda was published. And then if the 2/3 is obtained by the board, then the board may proceed to take action on whatever the item is that's not on the agenda.
Brian, have we done the subsequent urgency previously? Just if you could provide an example or two.
We have, but it's very, very rare. I can't think of one off the top of my head. I mean, I could come up with a hypothetical, but I can't think of when we've done that historically off the top of my head. Like I said, it's very rare.
If there is a major emergency, the board has delegated me to take immediate action under the condition that I inform the board president of that and then put that action on the next agenda for the full board to consider.
And the board has, unfortunately, quite frequently had to agendize emergency items, such as what Jim just referenced, when he has acted by delegation of authority to award a contract that exceeds his normal delegated authority. When there's been the Caldor fire, for example, when we've had pipeline breaks that have required immediate attention and so forth. All of those we've brought to the board, under the provisions that Jim specified. But as far as the board taking action on an item not agendized, very, very rare. The final exception is what's referred to as a holdover. And what this means is, the board could, for example, say, hey, we're not ready to take action on a particular item today during today's regular agenda. But you know what? We've got this special meeting that's happening in 3 days. Let's just defer it to that meeting. The board could then take action on that item even if that particular item wasn't on the special meeting agenda. Very rare, but I bring it to your attention because it is one of the limited exceptions under which the board can take action on a non-agendized item. And then finally, as you all know, the Brown Act requires that all persons be permitted to speak on any item of interest, so long as that item is within the board's subject matter jurisdiction, even if it's not listed on the agenda. And that's why on every board agenda, there's a place for the public to comment on items not on the agenda.
Is it at the discretion of the board president to limit the length of that discussion, or
Yeah,
do we need?
Good question. I didn't include a slide on this, but yes, the Brown Act and the district's bylaws indicate that the board retains the authority to place reasonable rules and restrictions on the public's ability to participate. And that is typically interpreted to mean time restrictions. So for example, the president could make a determination, hey, there's a lot of people here. It would be a reasonable thing to do to limit the public's engagement to 5 minutes or 3 minutes, depending on the number of participants.
And that's a case by case as it occurs, or do we have a part of our policy that says that, or?
Like I said, the board policies do specify that the board can adopt reasonable restrictions on the public's ability to engage. That's included in our bylaws. What that means is a determination. I think actually each agenda, if you look at the very first or one of the early pages of the agenda, it sets forth that the district, will can place reasonable restrictions, then I think limit comments to up to 5
Comment
minutes.
right there, limited to 5 minutes per person.
Oh, thank you. Speaking of doing your homework.
Hey, I used to be a school board president, and there was 200 parents wanting to speak one night, and it
Okay.
was 1 in the morning.
Thank
We
you.
don't want to do that.
Now, for, next slide, please. There are several provisions that are unique to the district, included in the district's bylaws that I wanted to bring to your attention regarding the district's meeting procedures. As you know, and as set forth on every agenda, we have included this provision that's also included in the bylaws, which is that the board of directors may provide brief reports on meetings, conferences, seminars attended, et cetera, et cetera. This is included in the bylaws, and therefore it's reflected on the agenda. It also conforms with the Brown Act. Next one, the board, members of the board who are unable to attend meetings shall, as indicated by the bylaws, if possible, inform the board clerk at the earliest opportunity so that the board clerk can determine whether or not there's going to be a quorum present. A quorum is the minimum number of board members necessary to convene a meeting and to take action. In our case, it's 3. Next, except as otherwise provided, action, this is also included in the bylaws, to constitute action taken on any item, a motion must receive at least 3 affirmative or negative votes. So for example, if we only have a minimum quorum, which is 3 board members, and there's a divergence of opinion on a particular item, a 2 to 1 vote, for example, would not meet the necessary requirement for action taken. That item would have to be deferred until a later meeting in which more board members could consider it. A motion for previous question may be passed by 3 affirmative votes. I'm going to just put a pin in that because I'm going to talk about what a motion for previous question is and why that's unique to our district. And then finally, the last point here, no matter upon which action is taken may be re-agendized or reconsidered for a period of 6 months, except through a specific process by which the board first agendizes whether or not to reconsider a particular item. And then if approved, then it comes back at a subsequent meeting to actually reconsider that particular item. Okay, and the purpose here is to ensure continuity of district operations, that, you know, the board isn't going back and forth on decisions that it has made.
My question regarding, say, for instance, two board members vote no, 3 vote yes. One of those board members may want to reconsider. It's not up to the noes to bring it. It is up to the yes.
Any
bring
board
it.
member can request reconsideration, but as long as the reconsideration follows the process that's outlined there. So for example, in your hypothetical, Director Inzini, if 3 board members voted yes and 2 board members voted no, and the you know, at a later meeting, the one of the board members, doesn't matter who, says, you know, this decision is really stuck in my craw, I don't think we got it right, there's other information to consider or something along these lines, I want to reconsider. Okay, then we would agendize at a future meeting whether or not to reconsider. At that meeting, the board would debate and take action on that. And if it voted, yeah, you know what, there is information that we missed, we got it wrong, we should reconsider it, then we would re-agendize again for another meeting to actually take action on that reconsideration.
So it's not strictly to the ones who voted yes versus no.
It's not, but the point,
And within 6 months.
it's not.
Once it's null.
That's right, and after 6 months, any board member could request
Right, you
reconsideration.
can bring it
without
back
following.
6 months and a day without
Okay.
going through that process.
Never, yeah, I've never heard of that one, so, you know, quite.
That it is
I've-
unique to the district, so I wanted to make sure.
We did a
to-
bit
to
of it
highlight
back in the bad old days, but
The battle days or the bad old
bad
days?
both.
Yeah,
So
we
this,
saw that, us in the audience saw it happen.
so basically, if it's less than 6 months, it takes 2 board meetings to bring something back up.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
Next slide, please. On to a summary of Robert's Rules of Order. Now, this will be very basic, it will be very high level. notwithstanding that I have memorized every word in this book, I'm going to leave it very plain and general today. That was my attempt at a lame joke, so thanks for humoring me. I have not memorized every word in this book. Robert's Rules of Order are complicated. And one additional caveat that I wanted to make here is every one of you and many of the rest of us in the audience very likely participate in other bodies in which Robert's Rules of Order or some form of Robert's Rules of Order are utilized during meetings. And so I'm going to provide you with some information today, and you might be scratching your head thinking, well, that's not how we did it on the such and such board, or that's not how we, right? Robert's rules are complicated and they are widely misutilized. So I'm going to do my best to provide you the information as I understand it. If this differs from information that you've received previously, or if you think there's a better way to do it, talk to me about it. Ultimately, the board retains authority. This is included in its bylaws. The board retains authority to revise the rules by which it conducts meetings or to differ from what's included in Robert's rules, okay? And I'm going to give you an example of how we've historically done that. So, high level here. The purpose of Robert's Rules of Order are to ensure that among a meeting that governed by a legislative body such as yourself, the meeting is effectuated in an orderly manner that is efficient and fair to all those participating, not just those seated on the dais, but also to those in the public as well. Some of the core principles that are enshrined in Robert's Rules of Order are that only one person has the floor, one speaker at a time. Also, everyone has an equal opportunity to participate. And by this, I've got the notation here at the bottom of this slide that it is the majority that takes action, but it protects the rights of the minority to ensure that, as I said, everyone has an equal opportunity to make their voice heard, to propose an action, and so forth. Board Policy 12080, again, this is our meeting procedures that I indicated before. It requires that the board meetings are conducted using Robert's Rules of Order. And so here are some basics in terms of roles and duties. Under Robert's Rules, there is always a chairperson. The chairperson presides over the meeting and ensures that the rules are followed.
With assistance of the...
I was going to get to that in just a moment. There are board members, and the role of the board members are to participate in the discussion and vote on motions. There is a board clerk. The role of the board clerk is to record the minutes and ensure that there's accurate documentation of the actions taken in the board. In our particular case, the board clerk also provides a lot of support to the chair to ensure that the rules are followed, and we're very lucky for that. And then finally, there are public participants that provide input on designated items. The chairperson's role is to recognize speakers, to call upon those and provide opportunity, to maintain decorum during the meeting, and to guide the meeting through its agenda. Next slide. Under Robert's Rules, every meeting should include an agenda, and that's a requirement of our administrative regulations, and it's also a requirement, as we discussed, of the Brown Act. Board action is accomplished by motion, and I'm going to talk about what that is, but essentially a motion is merely a proposal made by a board member to take a particular action. We tend to frame the staff recommendations as options. Option 1, award a contract, blah, blah, blah. Option 2, take some other action, or option 3, take no action. In terms of steps to process a motion, a member, once recognized by the chair, makes a motion. Another member, whether recognized or not, can then second the motion. The chair, or in many times, in our case, the board clerk, restates the motion, and then the chair opens the floor for discussion. Now, one thing I wanted to point out here is that very often in our meetings, our board clerk will say, wait, Director so-and-so, there's not a motion on the floor yet, right? The director might say, hey, this is how I feel about, well, there's not a motion on the floor. Under Robert's rules, any board member may ask a question at any point once recognized by the chair. But unless and until there's a motion to take a particular action, there is no debatable action. And that's why, we frequently hear that admonishment.
So queries at any time, discussion only after move and second.
That's right. Once the motion has been restated by the chair or the board clerk and discussion is had, then of course the chair calls for the vote and the results are announced by the board clerk. Next slide. So I'm going to talk briefly about kinds of motions. Now, I refer you to our board policy 12080 because that has additional detail beyond what I'm going to go over today in terms of the motions that the board typically relies upon. But just for your kind of general benefit, I thought I would kind of describe at a high level how Robert's Rules treats motions and what kinds of motions and so forth. So in terms of kinds of motions, the one that you will all be most familiar with is the main motion. This is a motion that brings a question of substance to the assembly for action, right? So this would be a move option 1 or I move that we award a contract to such and such, right? That's a main motion. There are subsidiary motions, and these are motions that themselves don't take a substantive action, but they deal with a main motion, and they therefore take precedent over the main motion in terms of action. So these are, for example, and I'm going to walk through these, a motion to postpone, either definitely or indefinitely. Now, this is hey, I don't think we're ready to take action on this. I move that we postpone action until some future point in time. It could be at a notified, at a, hey, let's take action next month, or it could be to postpone indefinitely, which is effectively killing the motion, right, if the board approves that. Now, I want to point out that a motion to postpone is different than a motion to table or a motion to lay on the table. And this is where, the motion to table is frequently misutilized because a lot of people think, oh, let's table this, meaning take no action on it. Well, that is true that a motion to table defers action, but a motion to table is utilized under under Robert's Rules under circumstances in which there is something of higher priority that must be done first. Okay, those are the circumstances in which it's permissible under Robert's Rules to lay on the table. And that's typically when, for example, the board is in discussion, it's dealing with an issue, and it is expecting a local dignitary to come by and provide a report. Oh, during the middle of the discussion, here's the dignitary. We can't really wait to finish our action. Let's lay on the table, hear from the dignitary, and then we'll remove from the table and finish our action. Okay, that's how a motion to table is intended under Robert's Rules to work. That's different from a motion to postpone. And the reason this is important is because a motion to lay on the table is not, a motion to lay on the table is debatable, whereas a motion to postpone is not debatable. Once a motion to postpone, I may be saying that backwards. It's a motion to postpone which is debatable. A motion to lay on the table is not. Okay, a motion to postpone is debatable by the board, and when misutilized, a motion, if I move to lay on the table, that motion is not debatable. The board has to immediately, once seconded, call for a vote. Okay, so that's why it's important to distinguish between the two, but I will help with that in the future if it becomes an issue. Lastly, I didn't mention the motion to amend. It's exactly what it says it is. It's a motion to change in some way the main motion that's under consideration or that's on the table. So for example, a motion to approve a contract to X, Y, and Z company for X amount. A motion to amend might say, someone say, I concur with the motion, but I'd like to amend the motion so that it includes a term. So it's award a contract to so-and-so for X amount for this term, right? That would be a motion to amend. It's a subsidiary motion. It deals with the main motion. I want to point out here,
A competing motion would be considered a second main motion, or?
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, if there was a motion and a second and it was under debate and someone said, someone's called upon by the chair, I don't like this motion, I think we should go in a different direction, I move that we do something else, that would also be a main motion. Now, very frequently, and this is why I've listed it here, very frequently we deal with what we refer to as a substitute motion. A substitute motion is permissible under Robert's rules as a motion to amend. So typically, the way a substitute motion would work is you'd say, award a contract to so-and-so for such and such amount. I concur with the motion, except for I'd like to substitute such and such amount for a different amount, right? That would be a very typical substitute motion under Robert's rules. But historically, the board has found it useful, and the board, by the way, is not unique here. Many organizations utilize a substitute motion in a much different way, which is to say, hey, it's more efficient for us to consider this other position as a substitute to the main motion rather than individually deciding on whether or not to amend, because a motion to amend requires a vote unto itself, okay? So for example, in our scenario, if I said the main motion is or award a contract to so-and-so for such and such amount, and someone says, well, I'd like to substitute such and such amount for this, the board has to first take a vote on that, whether to substitute that into the main motion, okay? That's how Robert's Rules works. That's very clunky, and it can be really confusing when you're talking about positions. Well, so the board has essentially, by past practice, allowed substitute motions to become main motions different from one another. Now, that's fine. The board has made that determination by past practice. There's risk there, and the risk is that Director Penn makes a main motion, it's seconded, where Director Day doesn't like that main motion, so he makes a substitute motion. There's a second, it's debated. Well, Director Dwyer doesn't like that substitute, so he makes a main motion back to the one that we started with, and then he's seconded, and Director Mansfield doesn't like that one, he wants to go with Day, so he makes a you can see how this can become kind of a spiral. So, at times you will hear me provide advice on, well, this is a motion to amend. This is a subsidiary motion to amend. A motion to amend may only be main motion may only be amended essentially twice, a primary and a subsidiary motion to amend. So we're getting into the weeds here. That wasn't necessarily my intent, but I want to make you aware that that this issue of substitute motion, it is different than how Robert's Rules deals with substitutes. It's a past practice that the board has become very comfortable with, and that's why we utilize it.
So is another way to approach, if someone makes a motion and there's a substitute motion in the air, to vote and defeat the main motion and then entertain what would have been the substitute motion, but now takes the place as a main motion?
Yes, that is how Robert's Rules intends for motions to be handled when there is a preference for a different alternative, is to vote it down and then move on to another motion in that order. That, as I said, is not always the way we've handled it, and so, I wanted to bring that to your attention, Director Day.
Well, yeah, because we did handle it that way, and it did get quite cumbersome, I can't even say that, but, and keeping track of things was sometimes difficult. So we did adopt by practice that, we have a main motion, and then someone can go to, want option 2 and propose something that's significantly different. It's not an amendment, it's significantly different, and then you get a second. And then rather than only debating one of them and only voting on one of them, we've allowed by practice we can debate all of them, usually it's just 2, but we can debate them at the same time. And then usually the alternative, because it came later, gets voted on first. And then we go, if that succeeds, then we're done. If it doesn't succeed, then we go to vote on what was the original motion. So that's kind of how by practice, how we've done it.
And then finally, I just, on one point on previous question, because I said I would come back to this, A motion for previous question, this is often utilized by call the question. Effectively, what that is a motion to end debate, right? We've been hearing about this, we've gone back and forth. I move to call the question. Well, that's a motion to end debate. It is not debatable, but it does require a second and a vote in order to bring the body to a close of debate on the main motion, okay? Now, Robert's Rules requires that this be passed by a supermajority of the legislative body. Our bylaws, the board decided that it would allow a motion for previous question or a termination of debate to be effectuated by a simple majority. So 3 board members may effectively end debate on a particular main motion and bring the board to an immediate vote on that motion. Director Inzini.
That's,
Yes.
thank you.
There we go. Yes, yeah, very good reminder that you know, the end debate is not intended it's not intended to stifle someone's point of view. It should be utilized to ensure efficiency of the meeting. Okay? Okay, and then finally, there are what are referred to as incidental motions. Incidental motions deal with the process of the board and less to the particular main motions. Like a subsidiary motion deals with the main motion. An incidental motion is different from a main motion, but it deals with the board's procedures or conduct. So for example, incidental motions that you might be familiar with are a point of order. A point of order is essentially a call to, it's a rules check, right? It's a point, you know, President Dwyer, point of order, I think that we violated the rules in some manner, and I would like your ruling on that to make sure that we're acting in accordance with the rules. When a point of order is made, it's not debatable. It does not require a second, but it does require a ruling of the chair, okay? And so this is where the chair has to kind of put on their thinking cap and decide, did we or did we not violate the rules? And then make a ruling. Now, typically...
With the assistance of counsel.
Counsel is here to help for that. A point of order is once the chair has made a ruling, that's it. The board moves on from that unless a board member feels that the ruling of the chair was not correct, in which case a board member can move an appeal. An appeal, unlike a point of order, does require a second. And what it does is it brings the decision made by the chair back to the board itself to make a determination. So, point of order, President Dwyer, I don't think that we, did this correctly. We should have taken this up first. The chair makes a determination. If I'm unhappy with the chair's determination, I can appeal. And if that's seconded, then the legislative body as a whole decides whether or not the point of order is.
That's kind of a new one. We haven't done that before.
We've not, thankfully, had to appeal the chair's determinations. Okay? And with that, I went longer than I expected. It was only 15 slides, but you got me talking, so.
Had to get our money's worth.
Thank you very much,
Thanks very
Brian.
much.
Before you go, Brian, so what I refer to as robots' rules of order, like underground regulations or something like that, Robert's Rules of Order is a private entity that creates this document that guides organizations. But we don't, it's more guidelines, explain something that is not a legislative document that we adopt. If we want to deviate from that for whatever reason, what's the process? What's the overview on that?
Good question. You're correct. Robert's Rules of Order is not enshrined in law, but it is enshrined in the district's bylaws. The board has adopted Robert's Rules to guide its meetings. Now,
Kind of like the Pirates Code.
maybe slightly more official than the Pirates Code. But the board does retain discretion to do two things, to interpret the bylaws if and when there's an ambiguity or question. And then secondly, as I indicated before, the board may, by supermajority, decide that, you know what, that part of Robert's rules doesn't really work for us. We're going to do something different. Okay? So yes, it's true. The Robert's rules are not enshrined in law. The board is not required to adhere strictly to them, except as otherwise set forth in its bylaws. Okay?
And supermajority is 4?
4.
Just one other observation. So as you can tell, I tend to be an active board member and an activist board member as necessary. But I have been peppering staff with questions incessantly.
Have you? I haven't noticed.
What? But, so my request is that, to staff, that if at any point that what goes from a query to a direction, just to bring it to my attention and redirect me to the general manager. That's just my request to staff, because, you know, I might inadvertently do that at times.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Brian. Great present, kind of anchor us in what are the rules we're supposed to be following. I'd like to point out, as I said previously, that I think the board members do their homework for the most part, maybe myself accepted.
388
We
pages.
do our homework, and the reason we're able to do that homework is because the board packages are so well thought out, so well presented, that there's little question about what we need to do. And I just take my hats off to the staff for doing that. And again, encourage you, if you don't think that you have enough information or you have an issue, contact the general manager and say, I need more information on this one or that one. And I think we've been a pretty effective board for the past few years, and I anticipate we'll try to follow those rules and continue moving forward.
Yeah.
So
And could we post that? I mean, I
it's
think
in
it
the
might
board,
be,
it's in our board office.
right, but even here, might be helpful.
Okay.
The,
The things from our office.
The request was to post.
Little plastic card carrying.
Yeah.
made out of asbestos.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to action item.
Point of order?
Actually, we're
Point of
going
order?
to do
Oh,
the.
see, that education was
Point
not
of,
good.
point of order, we need to ask for public comment.
Thank you, Director Day.
And the ruling of the chair is?
Yes, we'll take public comment. Thank you.
If members of the public, you've created a monster here, I see. If members of the public would like to address the board on information item number 9, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 9. I believe we're ready for action item number 10.
Okay, great. Moving on to action item number 10.
He's been waiting.
Yeah,
Long wait.
sorry.
Good morning, Board. Bill Pedersen, Drinking Water Operations and Maintenance Manager, or Drinking Water Operations Manager. Had several titles throughout my career, so.
Oh, hold on here. There we go.
Okay, I'm here today to request funding for our drinking water construction service line replacement project. Next slide. The picture there is indicative of a service line leak that we typically see between the meter and the main. So previous board action, just over a year ago, we were here to request funding for capitalized labor asphalt patch paving, materials, compaction testing, gravel, for a total funding request of $2,750,000 for our service line replacement project. A little bit of an overview. So we have just over 44,000 service lines in our service area. Our crews have repaired and replaced 518 lines in 2024. And our overall leak rate still exceeds that of the national average. This national average is based off the AWWA benchmarking, which is American Water Works Association. They go out and survey utilities like us to develop an average, and we're pretty far ahead of that average right now. So over half of our service lines are polyethylene service lines. This is most likely because of some of the booms we've had with construction in the 90s to in the early 2000s and carrying on to today. And those polyethylene service lines, we're seeing them last from about 15 to 30 years on average before they fail completely or start leaking. So our objectives with this project is to replace the lines whenever possible instead of just repair them. Typically, if we repair them, we dig down, put a clamp on them. We don't want to have to come back and waste resources. We want to just be able to replace that asset right away. Another objective is we want to reduce that failure rate, and we want to bring our leak average that to the median of other agencies of our size. And then we want to replace the polyethylene with the rolled plastic-coated copper lines. Those copper lines typically last far longer than the polyethylene. We can get 50 to 75 years of service life out of those assets. So a status update. Our program was established in 2020. You can see our target of overall either planned or unplanned service line replacements is about 500. So we're hitting that and exceeding that target routinely. In 2025, the program was revised based off our funding mechanism to only go after the unplanned service lines. As they leak, we roll up and we want to replace that service line in its entirety.
Yeah, I think can you back up one, Jennifer? I think that's an important slide because it shows we're doing the unplanned replacements almost 3 times as frequently as the planned replacement. So we're, of the total, there's only about 20% or less that are planned. And I'd really like us to do more of the planned and less of the unplanned. I think everybody would. It's just a budgetary constraint is keeping us from spending the amount of money to do that while we have other conflicting requirements for our capital funds. So I just wanted to point that out. We should be maybe set ourselves a goal to move more toward the planned versus the unplanned. And I know we're not going to jump there overnight. We can't say, okay, let's do all 518 as planned replacements. But maybe if we could go from 20% to 25% to 30% over our budgetary projections, that would be something I think would be worth shooting for.
Absolutely.
Yes, Director Enzini.
You want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I guess I take it that President Dwyer is, I agree with him. I guess my biggest concern is somewhere along the line there was an infrastructure act that was passed, and we hired a grant writer to maybe look at funding mechanisms, because this definitely hits that spot for water resources and for water infrastructure. Is there a possibility we get grants authorized in that, and where is our grant writer on that process?
I'm not familiar with where we're at in that process, but I'll definitely gather some information and get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
We actually interviewed a number of them last week, and I'm not sure if the selection has been made, but we can let the board
I
know.
thought we had a grant writer.
They left after a couple months and moved someplace else. The Infrastructure Act, although I have not read it, every word of it, to be used for funding of service line replacement, I think would be a stretch. I think they'd be looking at things like tank replacement, main line replacement, something bigger that has a much broader application and benefit to our customers as opposed to just service line. But rest assured, if there's a grant out there, we'll be pursuing that revenue.
Just, yes, sir, Director Day.
Well, yeah, this is kind of a, I think this is, I agree with you, Pat. I think this is really important because I worry that we're headed towards a cascade of failures because of the polyethylene pipes that were put in there. We don't do that any longer. We unfortunately did it for too long, and I don't want to, I will throw them under the bus. It probably was the building department that allowed that to happen, and we just said, okay. We don't. Now we insist on doing the coated copper piping. So we've stopped that as far as making the monster bigger, but it's still really big. I mean, 20-some thousand, and we're only doing 500. And if they are only, best case scenario, 30 years of life, maybe 35 or 40, but we could be hitting a point where we could be having 1,000 failures a year. And so that's where the proactive replacement, I agree, we need to try to figure out a way to accelerate that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next slide. So while we're out replacing service lines, oftentimes we're competing for underground space. We oftentimes find utility conflict. You can see we have anywhere from PG&E, whether it be power or gas, data communication lines, direct burial. So we oftentimes on the left-hand or the right-hand side, you can see our hydro excavation unit out there. We'll utilize that anytime we have a known conflict in the area. Next slide.
Does the hydro excavation minimize damage to those conflicting lines?
Yes,
It would
it
seem
does.
like it, instead of using a backhoe.
Yeah, it's utilizing water and then a vacuum
Yeah.
to suck out all the material. So there's a couple different ways we replace a service line. The top photo is our preferred method. It's a trenchless. Typically, we dig 2 pits. In the above photo, we only have dug the 1 pit, the receiving pit, and then the meter we use as a sending pit. So you could see where we're feeding the copper through the existing service line. We're pulling it through with the backhoe. This method helps with any remediation. We don't have to dig out any of the concrete. We don't have to remove the meter box. So it's a little bit less invasive. We don't have to use as much material for backfill. We don't have to repave as much. So you see on the bottom left, you see one of the pits being compacted. We typically do a couple different layers, compact each layer. And then on the right, you can see where we're doing that DOT compliance testing to make sure that we adhere to that compaction ratio. And when we repave that area, we don't have a sinkhole there later. Next slide. And then the method that we really want to kind of avoid is just full out trench. You can see it's pretty destructive. Have to use more material, more man hours. We have traffic mitigation that adds to the cost of the overall job. And then also plating the trench in high traffic areas. So this is just a before and after of a service line replacement. You can see in the middle photo, we have our cold patch asphalt. And then on the right side where they came in and replaced the concrete and the final paving. So our crews do a great job. They typically leave the area better than they found it. And this is proof of that. Next slide. So for a 2024 funding update, as you can see, we've utilized about 86% of our $2,750,000 budget. And you can see the project categories there. Next slide. So that brings us to our current funding request. You'll see that it's about 56% of last year's, taking into account that our shifting focus of just really going after the unplanned assets that have failed and our routine materials for that. So that's quite all right. So that brings us to your options, the board options. Option 1, authorized funding in the amounts of $769,165 for capitalized labor. $195,973 for materials and supplies, $125,000.
Actually, can I take over here so it matches what the agenda says?
Absolutely.
Authorize project funding in the amounts of $769,165 for capitalized labor. And I just want to be clear, all the amounts match. They were just combined. So what's on the slide is the same, but we combined it and then didn't update the PowerPoint. That's why it doesn't match. Authorize project funding in the amounts of $769,165 for capitalized labor, $321,312 for materials and supplies, $37,943 for compaction testing and El Dorado County Department of Transportation inspections, $317,060 for asphalt patch paving services, and $104,520 for concrete remediation services, for a total project funding request of $1,550,000 for the service line replacement project, project 25002.1. If you see the 195,000 and the 125,000 was the area that was combined. I just wanted to make sure that it was really clear and matched the agenda. Staff is recommending option one.
Move option one.
Thank you, Director Day.
Second.
Thank you, Director Penn. Any board discussion? Any public comment?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 10, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer, does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 10, option 1, moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Penn. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Thank you. Please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Moving to action item 11. Patrick, you're up.
Good morning, Patrick Wilson, Senior Civil Engineer, here today to present Flume 48 Replacement Project for the award of design contract, survey contract, environmental contract, and funding request. Next slide. So some previous board actions. In April of 2019, the board awarded a contract to Sage Engineers for the original geotechnical investigation for the Flume 48 tunnel option. In January of 2021, the board awarded a contract again at Fleming for Flume 48 preliminary design. Next slide. And then the board approved a contract amendment for Gannett Fleming to complete the preliminary design in 2023. And on October 15th of 2024, the board adopted the 2025 to 2029 CIP, which included this project. So a summary of the issue is to convert a wooden flume to concrete, as it's less susceptible to damage from wildfire and other natural hazards. This project was awarded a Federal Emergency Management Agency grant, a FEMA grant, which awarded a hazard mitigation, which includes the design and environmental services, which I'm presenting on today. It does have the possibility of a future construction grant funding, which the district will pursue, as Jim had previously mentioned. And we're seeking contracts for design, survey, and environmental services. Next slide. So just some background on the flume itself. It's 448 feet in length. It was originally constructed in wood in 1876. It is supported by a historic hand-stacked rock wall, and it's located north of Highway 50 near Camp 5. So just a historical photo here. I believe this was 1923. The photo was taken under some construction work. The flume was ultimately fully replaced in 1948, and subsequently is in need of upgrading today.
Pretty new.
Yeah. Excellent. So the current flume is pictured here. So that hand-stacked rock wall is on the left, and on the right you can see the flume itself, and the walkway will some challenges, of course, with the walkway. The new design for the flume itself will have a revised walkway that will be up to our safety requirements today. Next slide. And additionally, there was an emergency leak and also a temporary repair in January of 2024. As you can see, a portion of it had failed, and then ultimately staff on the right had made that temporary repair to keep it in service. So some of the preliminary design analysis included 4 alternatives. One was to stabilize the rock wall and replace the flume with a precast concrete structure, or replace the rock wall and with a precast concrete structure. Stabilize the rock wall and replace the flume with cast in place, and subsequently, of course, replace rock wall with cast in place. And then finally, construct a tunnel and remove the wooden flume. So ultimately, all those design alternatives were evaluated based on construction cost, constructability, performance, and maintenance. Ultimately, the tunnel was deemed infeasible due to some of the geometry challenges, as well as the need to continue to utilize the spillway that is attached to Flume 48. Also, we had to identify, as part of this design alternatives, we identified the need for a basis of design report to come out of it, to ultimately choose to stabilize or replace the rock wall, and again, cast in place or precast concrete sections to make the final determination. So staff generated a request for a proposal for design, which was advertised on November 25th of 2024. 7 consultants attended the proposal meeting. Ultimately, staff selected KGS Group International. KGS staff has completed designs for flumes 4, 5, 6, 38, and 40. They're well equipped to complete this project on an accelerated schedule. They have the most background in terms of understanding the flume system, what construction challenges could be laid in place, and help them manage any potential what ifs, if you will, in a contract design work. KGS, as we did for the other selected consultants today, we generated a matrix where we actually scored and ranked each one of the proposals that we received. And ultimately, KGS, because of their institutional knowledge and understanding of the design, really fall in line with what's needed for this project to remain on task and in order to complete the design in time to conduct and collect on that grant. RFP for survey was advertised on December 19th of 2024. Ultimately, staff determined REY Engineers was best fit for the work. REY has completed several survey services for flumes 44, 5, 6, 30, 42, and 43. And similar to KGS, REY provides the most institutional knowledge and the best understanding of what's needed to perform that work ultimately. Next slide. So for the environmental review, the project is subject to review under the California Environmental Quality Act. The project requires preparation of an environmental impact report due to potential adverse impacts to the historic rock wall. Staff initiated the CEQA environmental review process for the project with the release of the notice of preparation for an EIR and initial study. Public scoping period ends on January 30th of this year. The RFP for the environmental impact report was advertised on November 20th, 2024. Ultimately, staff selected Acorn Environmental, who demonstrated the necessary expertise and relevant work experience to complete the work in a time frame needed at the best value. So the project funding, staff is asking, including design services for KGS.
Patrick?
Yes.
Yeah, what was interesting about those slides was it was only the low bidder on the last one did we pick. There's 2 points. One is that it is a little concerning that we go with the familiar, which I understand the reasons, and it does make sense, but there's a certain risk to them starting to know, well, we've got the in, and their bids can creep up beyond what they might have been had they known it was more competitive. So I think we should be a little cautious about that. I already forgot what my second point was, so. It was a good one.
Director, I agree that we do need to be wary of Yeah, the bottom bidder on one was half as much as the company we selected. We probably have a good matrix that supports that decision. And I really, we've learned our lesson on a couple of projects where we went with the lowest cost and ended up paying dearly, and we're probably not done paying for some of those. So I think it's important to pick the contractor that's gonna be the best value for the district and the ratepayers.
And John will probably provide additional information describing why we selected those.
Yeah, and that actually, you reminded me of my second point, which the reason we can do that is these are professional services versus a contracting bid, where we have to, by law, go with the low bidder.
Correct. So again, John Money, Director of Engineering for the district. So actually, state law for engineering and professional services actually requires us to go on qualifications-based selection and not necessarily low price. So several agencies, what they actually do is they will actually interview a complete separate package, award, or initially go with the selection from that package, and then evaluate or negotiate costs. And so we're a little bit more streamlined in that we upfront will also request the bid prices or incorporate that into our design or our selection criteria. It is important to note for the low place on the civil design contract that the low price firm did not note any flume designed experience. And again, so those are the reasons that we are weeding other firms out. So we don't, especially when it gets to critical work such as the flumes, we need to have a firm that's in place, that's familiar with the terrain, the timelines, FERC regulations, all that comes into effect with our decision matrix. And so Patrick, I know, went through all those. So it's not necessarily, and the comment was made, familiarity with the district, and that is not a qualifier in any way. It definitely will increase a consultant's proposal, in order to hit the criteria that we need, because they're familiar on what we need to get a successful project. But that is not that's not how we select firms, as we are evaluating the proposals and the criteria to actually award the contracts.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure, why not? Cost offset by the FEMA grant. So just some background on the grant itself. We're obligated $790,000 for design, which includes environmental review and grant management costs for phase 1 of the project. Following successful completion of phase 1, deliverable staff will pursue phase 2, as I mentioned earlier, which could provide up to $7.9 million in federal funds for the project's estimated $8.8 million construction costs. Next slide. So board option 1 is award a contract to KGS Group International Inc. in the not to exceed amount of $488,946 for design services, REY engineers in the not to exceed amount of $82,878, and Acorn Environmental in the not to exceed amount of $98,800 for preparation of an environmental impact report, and authorized project funding of $50,000 for cultural resource studies, $30,000 for geotechnical investigation, and $125,000 for capitalized labor, and $43,781 in contingency, for a total funding request of $919,405 for the Flume 48 replacement project, project number 17028.01.
Thank you. Yes, Director Anzini.
I move approval of option 1 at $919,405.
Thank you very much. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Are there any board comments?
I'm sorry.
Good, no, go ahead.
Good, okay. Just a request. That's one of the very interesting things about EID is some of our historical assets, and seeing something, was it 1876 was the origin of that flume. That's pretty amazing. and fascinating. And I may not be fiscally viable, but it sure would be neat if we could save a little section of it for historical purposes and maybe, yeah. So just an idea, or parts of it at least.
High school project.
So, and building on that, if you could just expand on the Rockwall Historic District, just a little context. Thanks, Brian.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Brian Deason. I'm the Environmental Resources Supervisor for the district. And yes, I'd be happy to expand. The year 1874, so is when the rock wall was constructed. So it dates back to the original canal, which is really amazing. Number one, just that they could conceive that they could construct something like that on the steep slopes of the South Fork of the American River Canyon. The rock wall is one of 8 segments of rock wall located along the canal that is considered historic. We have several abandoned sections of rock wall up in the Plum Creek Canyon and the Alder Creek Canyon. We have several that are still supporting our flumes, Flume 48, Flume 45, excuse me, and several other flumes on the system. The flume is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and in order to be listed on the National Register, you have to meet a certain criteria. You have to be associated with some important historical event or important person, or in this case, for the flume, it represents a special construction technique, a unique construction technique. So the Flume 48 rock wall is about 300 feet long, 15 feet high in some areas. Its unique construction characteristics are that it's placement of large granite rock wall. It's dry laid, so there's no mortar holding it together. It's all different sized rock, which has functioned very well because it drains, seeps from the hillside. This particular project requires, as Patrick described, that we either some way stabilize that rock wall or remove it and replace it with an MSE wall. That constitutes an adverse effect to a historic resource. Under CEQA, that's considered a significant unavoidable impact, which is why we're preparing an EIR for this particular project. In terms of how to preserve some element of that rock wall, likely mitigation will be archival documentation of what the rock wall looks like. So we will hire a historic architect who will go out and take measurements, photos, write a report, so that the rock wall is not lost to history.
It's not really a question, I guess. The rock wall is not really accessible to the public for viewing or...
No, it's fairly inaccessible on a pretty steep slope.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, only the rafters see.
So we will provide copies of, for previous projects, we provided copies to the library so that information about the resource is available to the public.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How about a video?
It's been a number of years. Drones have become quite popular since the last time we did this, so.
Yep. Okay, any other board comment, questions? How about, is there any public comment?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 12, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item, number 11. Option 1 moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Mansfield. I believe that we're ready for the vote.
Okay, please vote. Thank you.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Moving on to action item 12. Elizabeth?
morning, members of the board. Liz Carrington, Engineering Manager here at the district. Today I'll be requesting a basis of design contract award and project funding for the district headquarters Corporation Yard Improvements Project. Previous board actions, October 15th, 2024, the board adopted the current CIP, subject to available funding, which did include this project. The district had previously completed a headquarters facility master plan back in the early 2000s, which did include improvements for the headquarters Corporation Yard. For those of you that are unfamiliar, it is on the northeast corner of this campus, right above the employee parking lot. Improvements for the Corporation Yard were deferred due to budgetary constraints during the recession. Today we have 7 work groups that currently occupy the Corporation Yard, and unfortunately these current facilities are inadequate to properly store equipment, materials, and spare parts that we need to keep our district running. So the 7 work groups that currently utilize the headquarters Corporation Yard are the drinking water construction and maintenance folks that do lots of planned maintenance, but also emergency repairs as well. Drinking water right-of-way group, which these folks clear the right-of-ways for our existing transmission mains so that we can access those at any time. Meter services, fleet maintenance, warehouse, construction inspection, their vehicles and equipment for that, as well as our electrical and instrumentation vehicles and equipment. All right, I'd like to walk you through a few photos of our upper Corporation Yard. We're going to start at the pedestrian gate and work our way north and east. Yeah, absolutely, thank you. Front and center of the screen is our weld shop slash fleet shop. And then in the back on the left-hand side is our warehouse. Next one. All right. The left photo is the back side of our weld shop, and the right photo is our storage, so to speak, of our weld component, our bits and pieces for our weld shop. All right, on the left we have a handful of shipping containers, essentially, that we use to store all of our materials, equipment, and tools for our fleet shop and a few other folks. On the right-hand side of the screen, we have some fluid storage, some paints and oils and whatnots with a nice little MacGyver ventilation system that we have on wheels. Next slide. All right, we have...
Liz, could you just go back for a second? I want to highlight that picture. Okay. That big fan's the ventilation system outside, and that plastic stuff around it?
Yes.
Is what?
It is containment for our supplies.
I mean, that's pretty antiquated.
All right, we have some of our older drinking water appurtenances and piping and fittings. Once it's deemed not acceptable for our drinking water system, we will keep these parts on hand for, say we need to do like a raw water bypass or whatnot. But unfortunately, we lack some of the storage to keep some of our drinking water appurtenances that we can reinstate back into our system. Next slide. On the left, we have AB storage. Typically, we'd like to see these in material storage bays so we don't see material kind of sloughing out and wasting throughout the facility. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, we have a few more shipping containers that we use for storage of our water pollution control, straw wattles and whatnot, and some of our other drinking water construction tools and equipment. All right, coming back around the east side of the upper Corporation Yard, we have our fleet maintenance, which any time of the day you can go up to our fleet and they have lots of vehicles, lots of commotion going on out there to try to keep our system up and running. On the right-hand side, we have this lean-to type structure that was kind of a quasi add-on to our fleet shop just because we needed additional capacity to store our vehicles as they come in to do oil changes and do our preventative maintenance. All right, this exhibit is actually back from early 2000s, the original master plan. Our needs have grown and changed since then, so we do need this contract to see what we need to do now to address our current needs. But I did want to include this just to note that back then, 20 years ago, we had already identified needs for additional fleet area, additional warehouse, and additional storage. So the scope of work for this project is to identify the current operational needs and logistic elements. Since we have 7 work groups, it's going to be a little bit snug up there. We need We need to conduct an inventory of current and planned personnel, vehicles, equipment, tools, material, traffic flow, and even future electrical vehicle charging needs. This effort will include a preliminary layout and list of improvements, as well as an initial cost estimate so that we can plug that into the CIP, a phasing plan if needed, and then also we need to address temporary relocation needs for these improvements. It's already pretty snug to begin with. It would be very challenging if we had a construction project going on at the same time. Also, we're going to request a description for environmental and permitting requirements for this project. Staff released a request for proposals in October of last year. Proposals were due in November. Kalpo Hom and Dong, or CH&D, they provided a proposal for $120,860. This particular firm, staff looked at the proposal. They've done this type of work all over Northern California. They're very, very well suited to do this particular effort for us. So therefore, staff recommends award to Kalpo Hom and Dong. Staff is requesting funding for the contract with CH&D, as well as capitalized labor and contingency for a total funding request of $165,860. I did want to note that this project is included in the CIP, and staff did plug in about $200,000 in expenditures for this year. Board options: award a contract to Kalpo Hom and Dong Architects in the not-to-exceed amount of $120,860 to prepare a basis of design report and authorize project funding in the amounts of $30,000 for capitalized labor and $15,000 in contingencies for a total funding request of $165,860 for the district headquarters Corporation Yard Improvements Project, project number 19050. Okay, option
Move one.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Thank you,
With a
Director.
comment.
Please continue.
This reminds me very much of the Bass Lake operation, very much. And, you know, it looks like a little shanty town, and the employees, I think, are happier where they're at now.
Yes, absolutely.
Just checking, because it certainly would improve the morale of employees to know that they have some value.
Thank you. Yes, Director.
I hope it doesn't, from a cost standpoint, go like that Bass Lake move did, because we started estimating around a $300,000 for completion, and we got bigger and bigger, and we're in multi-millions. So hopefully we nail it a little closer this time.
Thank you.
And so the Corporation Yard is one of the places I toured on Friday. And I mean, it was amazing watching the do-si-do of all the vehicles. But the two big things are personnel and material. Having our personnel working out in the elements, getting wet and hot and cold is just unacceptable. And then with the material, the oxidation and the UV degradation of the material sitting out in the elements is not due our ratepayers and the district itself a service. So I look forward to this as a long-term solution to clearly an existing issue.
Thank you. I'll just make an additional comment. You know, like the Bass Lake facility, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. And as you heard from the first part of our meeting, we have excellent staff and technicians that are out there giving it their all. We owe it to them to provide safe and clean and organized workspace, and I think this is a step toward that. So, thank you. Any other board comments? Oh,
I was just going to second that, the safety, the security aspect, I think theft, all those things. So hopefully security provisions are, we're paying attention. There's a lot of material loss in the private sector I observe these days too. So, yeah.
thank you. And any public comment?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 12, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Dwyer, does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on action item number 12. Option 1 moved by Director Penn and seconded by Director Anzini. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Okay, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. do we have any assignments or?
We have a couple, mainly from Director Day and Director Anzini on public outreach. We have an assignment from Director Penn on reaching out to the Strawberry residents for a possible tour of the facilities.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, we will adjourn the regular board meeting for El Dorado Irrigation District. And with Director Day's permission, I will convene and call to order the January 27th meeting of the El Dorado.
Prior to calling it to order, I just wanted to note, in accordance with the Brown Act, I hereby announce that board members are not receiving additional compensation for the Financing Corp meeting.
Dang. Thank you. So we'll call to order the Financing Corp meeting. And I think the purpose of this meeting.
Directors Penn, Mansfield, Dwyer, Anzini,
Yeah.
and Day present, Secretary Abercrombie, and Chief Financial Officer present.
Thank you very much for the roll call. Now, do I have a
I move to, we adopt the agenda.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, our new business,
We'll do public comment on the adoption of the agenda. If members of the public would like to address the board on the adoption of today's Finance Corporation agenda, please refer to the instructions on page 2. President Dwyer does not appear. We have any members of the public wishing to speak on the adoption of the agenda, moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Day. I believe we're ready for the vote on the adoption of the agenda.
thank you, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Now we will entertain nominations for.
We're going to have public comment for any items not listed on today's agenda for the Financing Corp. If any members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on items not on today's agenda. I believe that we are ready for new business item number 1, the nominations and elect officers for President, Vice President, Secretary, and Chief Financial Officer.
I would like to nominate Director Dwyer as President of the Financing Corp., and Director Anzini as Vice President of the Financing Corp., and Jim Abercrombie as Secretary, Brian Paulson as Counsel, and Jamie Bandy as Chief Financial Officer.
I just wanted to make a small correction. We do not have an elected position for our general counsel, just President, Vice President, Secretary, and Chief Financial Officer. If you would like to.
I will amend that and remove the Brian from that. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
And thank you, Director Mansfield. Is there any board discussion? Is there any public comment?
If members of the public would like to address the board on new business item number 1, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Dwyer, there does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on new business item number 1. With Director Day moving the motion to elect Dwyer as President, Director Anzini as Vice President, Jim Abercrombie as Secretary, and Jamie Bandy as Chief Financial Officer, and that was seconded by Director Mansfield. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Okay, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much, and I think we can adjourn the.
We'll have new business item number 2, which is the approval of the September 23rd,
Move on.
2024 meeting minutes.
Okay, motion and a second to approve the minute. Yeah, yeah. You should have.
President Dwyer has lots of meetings after this, so maybe that's why he's a little
Trying to
off
move
today.
things along.
Yes.
But, okay, is there any board discussion? Any public comment on approval of the minutes?
If members of the public would like to address the board on new business item number 2, please refer to the instructions in the agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear there in any members of the public wishing to speak on new business item number 2. Option 1 moved by Director Penn and seconded by Director Day. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. Now can I adjourn?
Yes, I believe we're ready for adjournment.
Thank you. Okay, we will adjourn the meeting of the El Dorado Irrigation District Finance Corporation at 11:45. Thank you all. Thank you.